This video is a continuation from the previous. Okay, so in the previous videos, I talked a little bit about color temperature and sunlight, sunrise, and I want to give you some resources and talk a little bit more about these things. Okay, so let's start with color of light, which is right here in front of me. And it is showing it in terms of light bulbs, but I picked this because we're really talking about sunlight, and it just was visually ordered in a way that I think makes more sense than this scale down here, which this is just a physical representation of the theory of color temperature. And theory, by the way, in science means an explanation of the facts, not something someone pulled out of the nether regions. Okay, so color temperature is defined as the temperature of an ideal black body radiator that radiates light of a color. Okay, right? Okay, I know. Lost me, lost you, we're all lost. Basically, it's this. In the morning when the sun rises, we're over here on the right, the color of the light reflecting through the atmosphere, and this has to do with the direction in which stars spin, is blue. So you're going to take photos that your eye adjusts for the morning light being blue. Doesn't look as blue to you as it does to the camera. But the camera, when you record it, you're sometimes going to get these really blue photos if you take them in the morning, and you're going to be like, wow, I don't remember seeing that. So here's the blue. And then as the sun begins to shift into noon, once you get to high noon or solar noon, you get white. The light does not have color. It's colorless. In the atmosphere is no longer reflecting light. And then as we move further into the day, it starts to get more golden. It's hence the term the golden hour, which also works over here. And the light gets more and more golden until you get close to sunset, when it becomes pretty warm. This is called the Kelvin scale. And each one of these has a temperature that's associated with it. And I'm telling you that because you may see that in places. So when you hear about Kelvin, you hear about temperature, this is what it's talking about. Obviously, this has a different temperature than this. And it works opposite of what you think it would be. This looks cold and this looks hot. But if you look up here onto the light bulbs, you see that the lower the number, the redder the light. Somewhere around, it's actually at 6,500, you have pure white, which is right in the middle here. 6,500 is high noon. Colorless light, no color at all. So it's right here in between the 6,000 and the 7,000 light bulb. And then as we move further away, we get to 10,000, which we start to get this really blue light. Okay, so keep that in mind, that when you're taking photos at different times of the day, the light has a color to it that your camera app, whatever you're shooting with, is going to pick up. It's going to record that your eye is already adapted and adjusted for. And there is a way to resolve that. In Blackboard, you have access to some different apps that will allow you to change the color temperature of your images to either accentuate it, make it stronger, or get rid of it. Okay? So there are ways we can work with that, and we're going to have a video on that. Okay? So let's talk about sunrise, sunset, and twilight. In one of the PowerPoints, it talks about this and it gives you examples. So hopefully you've reviewed the PowerPoint before you're looking at the videos, so it makes sense in that order. I just simply Googled sunset, sunrise, and because I live in Lithonia, it gives me what time the sun came up this morning and what time the sun is going to set tonight. Now, as most of you realize by now, the sun doesn't just pop up in the sky. It goes through a transition, and it doesn't really move. We do. As we are rotating, the sun incrementally becomes visible. And it does all kinds of really interesting things with the way those sunlight waves can't speak, reflect off of our atmosphere. And that's why we get all these interesting colors. Now, prior to sunrise, we have what is called twilight. And twilight is a period of time where you get sunlight, right? You go from darkness to astronomical twilight where you have some lightness, and then it increases and increases until slowly, right before sunrise, is usually when you get those really interesting colors on the clouds. And then you have sunrise, and then you have that period of golden light that lasts longer in the summer and shorter in the winter, and allows you to take really beautiful low light, nice low long shadow photos. And then the opposite happens around sunset. You get that golden hour, right? So you have 30 to 45 minutes before sunset. You have that beautiful soft light. Sometimes it's even longer in the summer. And then the sun sets and you have that happen. And then you start to move into twilight. And usually anywhere between 5 to 15 minutes after the sun has gone down, you start seeing really incrementally changing colors in those clouds. If you have clouds for the sunset, we call sunset sky. And then it moves into the sky, background of the sky turns purple, and then it becomes night. And then you can start to see the moon. Sometimes you see the moon. You start to see the moon in twilight, sometimes actually earlier. So you start to see the moon because it reflects the most light. And then you start to see some of the planets. Some of the first things you see in the sky are actually planets. And then you start to see the brighter stars, and then other stars. And if you go places that are really, really free from light pollution, one of the closest that we can go is in North Carolina. There are areas near Rocky Mountain National Park that are free from light pollution from the cities, and the Outer Banks on the opposite side. Once you go to the Outer Banks, where you can see the Milky Way in the sky, because we lose the light pollution, and the light pollution really can control. Make sure I'm spelling this right. And so light pollution can control how well we see the Milky Way. And you see the Milky Way better in, I believe, December. I think that's the best time of year to see it. Around the winter solstice. I think we rotate. But this is more what you'll probably see if you go out. It looks about what we normally can see. So you can start to see this. And I've been on the, also you can go down the Panhandle in Florida, and Santa Rosa Beach, and I saw this. It looked like that. It's beautiful. Just get this on the screen. This beautiful. That's what you see, right? So you get the sky. You can shoot with moonlight. It's a lot brighter than you think. Because we're rotating and the moon is rotating, it's really hard to get good images of the moon because it's moving and we're moving. And so if you have any kind of an exposure of the moon, most shots you're going to see of the moon are photoshopped. So anytime you're seeing exposure of the moon, this one's good. Okay, so anytime you see an exposure of the moon, they're exposing for the moon. They're reading the light off the moon to get it in focus and for it to expose properly. If you shoot for the scene, you're going to get a big blurry dot. And most often what happens is people will photograph, and that's absolutely 100% photoshopped. They will take a picture for the moon, expose for the moon, take another picture for the scene, and then go back and cut out the moon and bring it in Photoshop to get the moon in your scene. Because it's close to impossible to expose both correctly at most times. You usually get a moon that starts to become this big blur. It's really bright. People don't realize how bright it is. Okay, and so there are some resources that help you locate. Say you want to go on a road trip somewhere, and you know where you're going to go, and you can put in information. There we go. So you can put in information for where you want to go, and this is just for Atlanta, but you can search for city or a place. And this website is called timeanddate.com. So in Atlanta, went to Atlanta, and this is just looking up for today. Today for me, you may be watching this at some point in the future. The days will be different. And it gives you all this information about the sun. It gives you a graph, which, okay. But it gives you night, astronomical twilight, nautical twilight, civil twilight, daylight, solar noon and midnight, and then it reverses. It goes back the other way. Okay, so it's basically saying at 4:43 in the morning, you're going to start to see some light, and it's this one right here. See how it highlights this area? I love this thing. Okay, so here's night. We start at midnight, and we move into astronomical twilight here, and then at 5:23 it begins to transition. We get more light. So from 5:23 to 5:58 we get more light. And then at 5:53 to 6:28, more light, until we move into daytime. And sunrise at 6:28 this morning. There are 14 hours and 24 minutes of daylight today. And then we reverse it. And then we move backwards into civil twilight, nautical twilight, astronomical twilight, and night. Now, oh, and it also gives you solar noon, which was at 1:39 this afternoon. And then it tells you solar midnight, which actually is not at midnight. All that simply means is the 1:39 p.m. is the brightest time of the day, and 1:39 a.m. is the darkest time of the day. It's the middle of these bars. Okay. So it should also give you, oh, here's a chart for the entire month of June, in July, in August, and September, and you can go through these. So if you know you're going to be somewhere, you can look this up, and it will give you all this information. Now, I thought this one gave you, it doesn't. Moonrise, here we go. If you scroll all the way down, you can go to the moon. If you decide you want to take photos at night, your cell phone is not going to do a great job of that because they don't yet make cell phones as sensitive as DSLRs. But I do want to discuss this just so you're aware of it. If you are going to shoot at night, the moon makes a difference. The moon is a source of light. And sometimes you want the moon, and sometimes you don't want the moon. And because the moon is on a different cycle than the Earth, it is going to come up at different times of the day. It's not like sunrise and sunset that are somewhat more predictable. It's a little more different. So here's the chart that helps you determine. So based on, say, July 4th, the moon is going to set at 5:49 in the morning, and it's going to come back up at 8:43 at night. And then the next day it's going to come up, and you see it's kind of an hour. It's not quite an hour difference. So it's going to change. It's going to go through this cycle. And then it's not until we get to the 10th that it starts coming up at night and setting in the morning. And this is the phase of the moon. This is a full moon. So we're going to have full moon on the 5th of July. That's the date that we're going to have full moon. It's going to come up at 6:46 in the morning and set at 9:38 at night. So just let you know if you're going to include the moon in your shots, or you want to use it as a light source, or you want it completely black, which that doesn't happen until the 20th of July. It allows you to see and to know whether or not the moon is going to be a factor in your scene. And I think I went over on time.